Okay, well, for anyone who might not know, Chrono Trigger is a JRPG that came out on the Super Nintendo back in 1995. It's arguably one of the best RPGs ever made, and certainly one of the best, if not the best, JRPG that came out for the SNES. The game involves time travel. The logo has a ticking clock and a pendulum, so when it came to make a clock, Chrono Trigger seemed like a really good and obvious choice for a design theme. After getting the design out of Illustrator and into the laser cutter's proprietary software, it's time to actually start etching. The first pass is a raster pass, which means that the laser goes back and forth, left to right, top to bottom, the same way an inkjet printer might. The laser just turns on when it's etching and off when it isn't, so it's literally an on and off kind of process. The second pass is a vector etch, where the laser follows the lines from the software perfectly. To etch into the wood instead of cutting, it just uses a lower power setting and a normal speed. When it comes time to cut through the wood, I use full power on the laser and I turn the speed down way slow. For this clock design, I make the C's darker and I make them out of a separate piece of wood. Since the C's are really quite small, I usually cut a whole bunch of them at one time out of a single sheet of wood. It's also cut from thinner wood, so I can actually have the speed go a lot faster than when it's cutting through the thicker stuff that the main clock face is made out of. And then finally it comes time to remove the wood from the laser cutter and sand it. I also sand the edges of the clock using a Dremel. The Dremel gets rid of a lot of the roughness and it gets rid of the charring, but I still go over it with sandpaper afterwards. Since I do all of the C's at once, you can see me staining a whole bunch of C's here, even though I only really need one C for this clock. For the lighter wood, I don't even bother staining it anymore. So the first thing I do is apply the polyurethane to the areas that were raster etched, because those areas are the most porous. This is the first coat of polyurethane, so I'm not worried about it being smooth or perfect. I just want to make sure that it's an even coat over the whole thing. In order to get it really smooth, this time I sand with a much finer grit sandpaper. I wipe the pieces down afterwards to get rid of any dust from the sanding, and in any areas that were etched, I even go in with compressed air to remove it. For the second coat of poly, I still make sure to go into the deeper and recessed areas first. This time I'm a lot more slow and careful with the application of the poly to the clock face. Now obviously, with the poly still wet, it's a lot more reflective and shiny than it will be when dry. But this still gives me a good way to make sure that the application is smooth and consistent. It's extra important at this point that it dry on a flat, level surface. Otherwise you risk getting liquid pooling. In fact, on this C, you can see areas where it would pool if it weren't left to dry somewhere flat. You can see the difference between the C that's been polyed once and sanded versus the one that has been polyed a second time. The sanding smoothed over the rough and bumpy areas from the first coat, leaving a flat surface for the poly to rest on top of. The clock mechanism is a pretty standard quartz battery-driven movement. The pendulum is entirely aesthetic, as it serves no real purpose in keeping time. The pendulum mechanism isn't even directly connected to the clock mechanism. Put the movement into the pendulum drive case, slide the whole thing into place on the back of the clock, put on the washers, tighten the nuts, then put on the hands. In some cases, I'll go do another coat of polyurethane to get things even shinier, but I generally feel that the two coats, if applied evenly enough, gets a good enough shine, so I'm happy with it. That's pretty much it. Hope that gives you an idea of what all is involved in making one of these things. I'm going to try and post more process videos, so if you want to see more things like this, you can subscribe or whatever. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and feel free to visit my Etsy page. Thanks! See you later.